Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for coming. My name is Ailsa Schofield. I'm here from the Bureau of Meteorology and I'm a senior hydrologist. I'm here today to talk to you about the unfolding weather situation and flood situation. As many residents in the Greater Sydney area, Illawarra and South Coast would have experienced overnight and earlier today, very heavy rainfall has been occurring and is forecast to continue to occur for the remainder of today in the Hunter, parts of the Central Coast, Greater Sydney, Illawarra and South Coast areas. We're not expecting to see the easing of this very heavy rainfall until this evening, where we will see the continuation of rainfall in these areas throughout Friday and over the weekend. We may also see moderate rainfall in parts of the Upper Macquarie, Bogan and Lachlan rivers from Friday into Saturday. So what this means for the communities that have been experiencing this rainfall is that we do have a flood watch in place, which is a heads up for the potential flooding for the areas in the Greater Sydney area, Upper Hunter, Illawarra and South Coast, in most of these locations for minor flooding. The exception is the areas that we are already experiencing flooding, where we have current flood warnings for the Hawkesbury Nepean rivers, the Georges River and the Cooks River. We are already experiencing major flooding for the community at Menangle, and we have forecast for a major flood peak to occur later this evening, and that will be near the April 1988 flood level. This is higher than the March 21 and 22 flood levels. For Wallachia, there is also a forecast for major flooding to be reached overnight Friday into Saturday. Again, a greater than the March 2022 event near the 1988 flood level. For Camden, we also have a major flood warning in place for that to reach the major flood level later this evening, and that will be higher than the March 2022 event. Major is also possible with the further rainfall forecast in the North Richmond area, and based on the rainfall that we've seen in the forecast, expecting that to be lower than the March 2022 flood event. There is also the potential for major flooding along the Georges River at Liverpool and Milpera from Thursday afternoon. So what I'd really urge the residents in these areas to do today and into tomorrow and the weekend is to keep up to date with the latest warnings and forecasts, as we are already experiencing and have forecasts for major flooding in these areas. There is also the significant risk of continued flash flooding in the Greater Sydney, Upper Hunter, Illawarra and South Coast areas from today and into the weekend. So I'm really urging residents to stay up to date with the local weather and warning information and stay safe. I should also remind people, if you're planning on travelling into the weekend with your friends and family, we do have school holidays coming up, is not only do you need to be aware of the weather and flood situation in your local area, but you also need to be aware of the areas that you're travelling through and travelling to. So please do stay up to date with those warnings and forecasts. I'll now hand over to Acting Commissioner Daniel Austin from New South Wales State Emergency Service.
Thank you, Ailsa, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. Over the last 24 hours, the New South Wales SES, together with its partner agencies, has responded to in excess of 680 requests for assistance as a result of the system that we're seeing move through the Sydney metropolitan area, the Illawarra, the South Coast and surrounding areas. Included in that, there have been 25 flood rescues undertaken, the majority of which result from flash flooding and people being caught out by significant downpours of rain, particularly in the Sydney Basin and also through the Illawarra. As you've already heard from the Bureau, there are a number of flood warnings in place across the Hawkesbury Nepean Valley, but also down then across the South Coast and the Illawarra. We have seen exceptionally sharp, short bursts of rain that have created significant flash flooding events around parts of the Illawarra, particularly this morning, where we've recently undertaken in excess of half a dozen flood rescues for people who have been caught out. That rainfall event has seen a number of schools proactively close across the area, and once again we ask people to limit any non-essential travel through the area to make sure that they don't put themselves nor their rescuers at risk. At this point in time, the New South Wales SES has in excess of 500 volunteers supported by our partner agencies across the footprint of this particular storm event. They are currently active out in the field and have been overnight and will continue to be through the day. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank many members of the community for being so proactive over the last 24 hours. They have clearly listened to the warnings that have been put out, and we have seen significant demand for sandbags across many parts of the warning area. Community members have taken it upon themselves to prepare their properties ahead of the rain event, and it is in part because of that that we see such a low number by comparison of both requests for assistance and flood rescues overall. We ask the community to continue to be vigilant. This is a highly dynamic situation. These events are moving exceptionally quickly, as was witnessed in the Illawarra this morning, where we saw in the space of about 3/4 of an hour significant downpours, significant flash flooding, as I mentioned, and a number of properties impacted by those flash events. As Ailsa also mentioned, the school holidays are coming up, and we are aware that many people will take the opportunity to travel. We ask them to be absolutely mindful of not only the conditions that they face at home, but the conditions that they face as they travel, and the conditions that may occur when they arrive at their destination. We ask people to stay absolutely across the warnings, across the weather situation, but be aware of your surroundings at all times. We have a couple of days before this system clears out from the intense rainfall that we're seeing, but we will continue to see river systems react, and major flood warnings exist for a number of catchments already. Evacuation orders are already in place for parts of Warrenora and Bonnets Bay, and evacuation warnings are in place for locations such as Picton and Camden. Those situations will change and more warnings will be issued as the need arises over the coming days. As you've heard from the Bureau this morning, those floodwaters will take some time to move through the catchment, and we will continue to warn the community as those conditions changes. I ask the community once again to be mindful of their scenario, be aware of their surroundings, and do not drive, walk or ride through floodwaters. If there is a need for SES assistance, 132 500, and if there is a life-threatening emergency, please contact 000. Any questions?
Yeah, obviously just such an enormous part of the state is now impacted by this weather event. Where are you really concentrating your efforts? Where would you say are the priority areas at this stage?
Yeah, so certainly the areas of activity today, the highest areas of activity are through the likes of the Sutherland Shire, down through into the Illawarra. But broadly across the Sydney metropolitan area and into the Illawarra itself, we are seeing some activity down through the south coast. And as the system continues to move and continues to change, we'll continue to move resources and work together across that whole warning area. So really at the moment, it's effectively from the central coast south through the metropolitan area down through the Illawarra and the south coast.
You said some properties had started to see some flash flooding in the Illawarra. Can you elaborate a little bit further on sort of specifically where they are?
Yeah, so we saw both down around Dapto and around the university precinct around Curraville. We saw some pretty significant runoff off of the escarpment in places. Certainly through the Illawarra, there's been messages going out all day about road closures and flash flooding of I guess the more usual locations, and certainly through the Illawarra there are a number of those that are well known to locals. But we did see some pretty significant runoff off of the escarpment this morning that saw some really sharp and fast creek and river rises.
And Elsa, we heard this morning Sydney's already passed its yearly average rainfall total in just 3 months. Obviously the rain's been relentless, but is there any indication about whether there could be some reprieve?
So unfortunately we continue to be in a La Nina event, which we know for New South Wales means that we can expect to see higher than average rainfall conditions, which is exactly what we've seen over the past couple of months. And we are expecting La Nina to continue throughout the remainder of April.
What's the level of the rainfall been like? We heard there were short, sharp bursts today, and I think it was 140 mils was predicted sort of over a 24-hour period. Have we exceeded that though?
So in some locations, so we've talked about the widespread heavy rainfall, which is consistently what we've been seeing, and we have seen those isolated higher totals, and we'll continue to see those for the remainder of the day.
Can I just ask about the flood rescues in the Illawarra as well? Were they mainly people who had driven into floodwaters? What's the nature of those rescues?
Yeah, so a couple of the ones that I've seen have been very much where people have been caught out. Where we've seen that really sharp, intense rainfall, visibility significantly reduced, makes driving conditions dangerous in itself, and people were caught out in some of those low-lying areas. Crews, not only from the New South Wales State Emergency Service but also Fire and Rescue New South Wales and others, have been quite active this morning across the Illawarra.
And Daniel, just on that as well, people needing assistance with evacuating. We saw some of your crews out this morning helping some people evacuate before the waters sort of got too close. Has that been happening a lot as well?
Yeah, so as I said before, there's been quite a bit of preemptive work by the community, and I've said many times in the past, this is ultimately a team game. We all need to work together. We ask the community to listen, to be proactive, to take actions to look after themselves, and absolutely that's what we've seen in the last 24 hours. As I said, I'm aware many units have dished out exceptional levels of sandbags to people so they can prepare their property, because people are taking this seriously, and that is an absolute credit to the community. And that makes our job easier. It makes our volunteers on the ground their job easier, and they don't have to put themselves at risk to come and help.
Yeah, and I suppose critically the message would be to stay on alert, into this evening and then into tomorrow as well. Yeah,
so as Ailsa has said, we've still got some way to go before the system clears right out, and even as it moves out of some parts. As we said before, there is a real risk of river rain flooding that then follows this all the way up and down through the Hawkesbury and Nepean Valley, but also down through some of the other areas into the south coast. So, we really ask the community to remain vigilant, to be aware of their surroundings, to stay across the warnings as they need to be.
Daniel, I've seen posts on social media about people who can't access sandbags and other resources. Is there any advice? Is there any other things people can do that can't access those?
So if you've got some examples, I'm happy to follow those up afterwards and happy to have that conversation. I'm not aware of where that's arisen. We work very closely with our partners in local government to make sure that we're constantly refilling sand supplies and the like. But there are a number of things people can do to look after their own properties, including moving some of their possessions that are in low-lying parts of their property. Again, being aware of their surroundings, understanding where the rain is coming from and where it may work into the property itself. So There are a number of small and simple tasks, and there is a lot of information on the New South Wales SES website that people can go and access as well for handy tips and hints.
How concerned are you about Picton? Because I know Stony Quarry Creek is always a bit of a worry in events like this and has been in the past. And there's an evacuation warning there at the moment. How quickly is that creek rising? Is that a concern for you?
Yeah, so Picton reacts fairly quickly, as you say. So the reason the warning went out earlier this morning was to give people that heads up and to be aware. We know the community in Picton is very aware of its surroundings and knows the way that catchment reacts. So we will continue to update that scenario through the day, and any additional warnings or orders that are required, we will push them out as we need to.
And have you got many concerns around the western parts of Sydney, or is it more in the southwest?
At this stage, with the flash flooding that we're seeing and the heavy rainfall, it is largely through the southwest. However, as we talked about, we're expecting to see the riverine flooding as well. So we'll almost move from one theatre into the other as that moves forward.
And how are your crews? You must be exhausted.
Yeah, so the SES volunteers, supported by all our partner agencies, have done an amazing job. Not only over the last 6 to 7 weeks, but really it's been 2 to 3 years almost of continuous operations across the state, and they continue to turn up. As I keep saying, it is very much a team effort, and we thank their employers particularly for letting them go. We also thank their families for letting them go, and being aware that there are some things they're just not at. But morale is high. People are out there helping the community in their communities, and that is one of I guess it's almost a pleasure in itself. It gives people a motivation to go and do that and contribute to your community to that degree. So there are a lot of people on the ground. We have great partnerships across all the other agencies as well. And we will continue to support the community going forward through this and the next event that pops up. Cool. Thanks, guys.